Back in the late 80s, while America was vibing to neon lights and highway road trips, there was a woman out there hunting on the dark side of Florida's back roads. Not some masked psycho, it's not some shadow in an alley, a drifter, worker, a woman with a past so twisted it almost sounds unreal. Her name? Aileen Wuornos. 7 men, shots on lonely highways, and a story that still got people asking, was she cold-blooded or was she fighting back? This ain't just another serial story. This is America's most infamous female predator and the chaos she left behind. Aileen Wuornos wasn't born evil. She was born into instability. February 29th, 1956, Michigan. Her parents were barely more than children themselves. Her father was later convicted of child molestation and died by while serving time in prison. Her mother abandoned the family when Aileen was still very young. She was raised by her grandparents in a household reportedly marked by neglect and alleged abuse. Childhood didn't last long for her. It couldn't. By her early teens, she was already surviving on the streets, exchanging her body for money, sleeping in the woods, getting arrested for minor crimes. This wasn't the beginning of a villain's rise. It was the beginning of a child forced into survival mode. And when someone grows up surrounded by trauma for that long, the brain adapts. It stops seeing the world as a place of opportunity and starts seeing it as a constant threat. By the late 1980s, Aileen Wuornos was drifting across Florida's highways. No permanent address, no safety net, no one steady in her corner. She survived by working the roadside, approaching mostly middle-aged men traveling alone. It was transactional, detached, mechanical. Somewhere along that stretch of asphalt, she met Tyria Moore. For a brief moment, it seemed like stability had finally entered her life. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was attached, invested, protective. But love doesn't rewrite trauma, and poverty doesn't vanish because hope shows up. The past was still there. The fear was still there. The instability was still there. And between 1980 and 1990, something inside her fractured. Not overnight, not without warning, but when it finally broke, the consequences would echo across Florida's highways. The first confirmed victim was Richard Mallory. Aileen Wuornos later claimed he attempted to sexually assault her. According to her account, she fired the gun in self-defense, but the violence didn't stop there. It happened again, and then again, until the number reached 7. 7 men in total, all shot with a firearm. Most of their bodies discovered along remote highways or in wooded areas across Florida. Detectives began to see a pattern, similar locations, a consistent method, and personal belongings missing after death. What started as a possible act of self-protection began to look more systematic. Was it retaliation? Was it survival? Or was it something far more deliberate? That question still divides opinion today, because her narrative shifted over time. At moments, she insisted every shooting was self-defense. At others, she admitted there had been intent to rob. The boundaries between fear and calculation blurred, and somewhere in those contradictions, the truth became harder to pin down. January 1991. After months of uncertainty, law enforcement began closing in. Fingerprints linked the cases. Pawned belongings traced back to victims. Witness descriptions started aligning. The net was tightening, but the real turning point wasn't forensic. It was personal. Tyria Moore agreed to cooperate with authorities. Under guidance from investigators, she placed recorded phone calls, urging Aileen Wuornos to tell the truth. At first, there was hesitation, then emotion, then confession. Shortly after, Aileen was arrested at a biker bar in Florida. The news spread fast. America was stunned. A female serial killer? That wasn't the narrative people were used to seeing. The media frenzy began almost immediately. Headlines, speculation, nonstop coverage, and just like that, the woman who had drifted along empty highways became a national spectacle. In 1992, Aileen Wuornos stood trial. The courtroom felt sterile and unforgiving. Harsh fluorescent lights, cameras lining the walls, every expression captured, every word dissected. At times, she appeared composed, almost detached. At others, she seemed visibly angry, volatile, unpredictable. The jury ultimately found her guilty on multiple counts of first-degree murder. The sentence, death. But incarceration didn't quiet the chaos. If anything, it intensified it. From prison, she gave a series of unsettling interviews. She spoke of conspiracies, claimed she was being targeted, alleged that the facility was subjecting her to sonic pressure as a form of torture. Her statements grew increasingly erratic, and then, unexpectedly, she made another decision. She dropped her appeals. No more legal delays, no prolonged battle through the courts. She told the judge she wanted the death sentence carried out. Final. Immediate. No more fighting. October 9th, 2002. Florida State Prison. Aileen Wuornos was executed by lethal injection. The process was clinical, procedural, final. In her last statement, she made a strange reference, saying she would return like Independence Day, echoing apocalyptic imagery. And just like that, the woman who once haunted Florida's highways was gone. No more headlines, no more courtroom outbursts, no more interviews. But the case didn't end with her execution, because the debate never did. Was she a calculating predator, a product of relentless trauma, a symbol of systemic failure, monster, victim, or something more complicated than either label allows? More than 2 decades later, the questions still linger, and perhaps that uncertainty is what makes her story endure. Here's the part most people avoid. The majority of serial killers are men. But trauma doesn't recognize gender. Aileen Wuornos lived a life marked by reported abuse, chronic instability, poverty, rejection, and accumulated anger. None of that erases 7 lives lost. It doesn't justify it. It doesn't undo it. But it does force a harder question. How does someone fracture to that extent? This case isn't just about crime. It's about trauma, about justice, about the thin line between survival and destruction. It challenges the idea that evil appears out of nowhere, because sometimes what we call a monster is the result of years of damage, neglect, and untreated wounds. And that complexity, that uncomfortable gray area, is what makes this story so deeply disturbing.